would say I'm strong. I'm a survivor. Here's the deal. Our vulnerabilities are not weaknesses. Our vulnerabilities can often be taken advantage of, and if you don't know what your vulnerability is, that is the time that it's easier to be taken advantage of. So I want you to go away with, I'm going to do something. I want you to put a face to this, and I want you to know that you are only really one circumstance or one weak moment of who your value and worth is, that this could even possibly happen to you. And if it's not being trafficked, there's other things that we allow happen to us that we get taken advantage of. So much can be learned. So what we're going to do is each one of these is part of my story is a vulnerability, okay? And as I tell the story, Fred, you're going to tie it around. So you're just going to keep tying, okay? Keep tying these around your wrist one at a time. So go ahead and get started. So my story begins with my mama. My mama gave birth to me. And she ran away at the age of 12 because she was being raped by her uncles, her cousins, and her brothers. And she had determined that it was safer to live out on the streets than live at home. At this point, I'm not even born, but would I have any vulnerabilities?
Yes.
Raise your hand quickly. Tell me what my vulnerability is.
Non-trusting.
Excellent. What else? Keep time, Fred.
I guess you feel, well, your mom can't keep you safe. I mean, because things that's happened to her made me feel like she can't keep you safe.
I must tell you, this is the first time I've talked about this, that somebody has talked about the vulnerability and not the circumstance. Oftentimes I'll get you're homeless or that. Homelessness is the circumstance that makes us more likely to be vulnerable, but what the vulnerability of homelessness is not a safe place to go. Not having shelter, not feeling safe. Do you understand the difference between a circumstance and a vulnerability? Now, can somebody pray on a circumstance looking for that vulnerability? Absolutely. So, born to my mama, at the age of 3, I ended up back into foster care for the first time. The statistics for girls who are more likely to end up being trafficked who are in foster care is extremely high. Somebody that has a statistic, you can correct me, but I want to say it's between 70s and 80%. Anybody in here got that for me? All right, somebody can Google it and find the answer later. So in foster care at the age of 3, the first time that I had any sexual violence was at the age of 3. It was at the age of 3 that a man stuck a body part in my mouth that shouldn't have been stuck there. At this point, is there any vulnerability that I have? Okay, the answer would be yes. Anybody know what that vulnerability would be? I was a child. Defenseless. Yes. What could a 3-year-old do?
Nothing.
Right. What is something we tell our kids all the time? Huh? Say no to strangers. What about when an adult tells you to do something?
Listen. Tell them you always tell them to listen.
Do as you're told. What got robbed of me at the age of 3?
Innocence.
Your innocence.
Absolutely. So at the age of 3, that begins. I will tell you, I don't know a lot, remember a whole lot between the age of 3 and 7. A lot of disassociating happens. At the age of 7, my mom came back into my life and custody of me, and we had an amazing first year. I finally had my mom. What little girl or little boy does not want to be with their mom instead with a bunch of strangers? And I was happier than a pig in mud. First year was amazing. We lived in a very poor area. We lived in a single-wide trailer. At this point, I will say that the circumstance was poverty for us. Now, at this point, I would not be classified as being trafficked. The story's going to change here. Hey, Anna, I just saw you. But at this point, any vulnerabilities with poverty?
Yes.
Yeah.
Speak up. What is it?
Yes.
What is it?
You don't have
I guess
any resources.
Inferior? Feeling like you may not measure up to somebody else? Where's my place? Very good.
Unworthiness.
Unworthiness. Yes, at this point, my unworthiness was already defined. My value as somebody who was unworthy, who at the age of 3 to 7 is worthy of being loved and cared for when your mom is somewhere else and your dad is in jail. So that was already defined for me, and it was just redefined by that. We can be very cruel to people who aren't like us. So absolutely. Always wondering where your next meal is, or, that responsibility of where am I going to go next? So all of this is important to know, because although he's been really quick here, because I did tell him to be quick, before I'm even trafficked, was I enslaved?
Yes.
Yes. Do you see how vulnerabilities, when taken advantage of, can keep us enslaved? So when somebody asks, and I get asked this all the time, why don't they just leave? Does anybody ask that question? Why don't they just leave? Anybody think it? Okay, nodding. Awesome. I'm an old lady, so you guys are going to have to talk a little bit louder, okay? I want you to try, Candy. Can you, don't try super hard because I know you're strong, but can you break free right now? Okay. Come on, you want to leave, right? Why don't you just leave? So at this point, I'm not trafficked. Here's the other thing. All of our wounds, if unaddressed, still remain wounds. And if they're not healed, we're going to end up doing something harmful or end up going back to the life or the circumstance that we were in. And that happened to my mom. She lost her income. She's now a single mom with me, and she needed to make money. Well, mom's already known, because she had been trafficked before this, where to make the money. For someone who, at the age of 12 and 14, is living on the street and having to prostitute herself, or having somebody be thoughtful enough to protect her and help her get that income, what does she know to go to get quick money to take care of her kids?
John, the pen.
Selling her body. Selling her body.
Doing something strange for a piece of change.
It's quick money, guys. In Charlotte right now, it is about $60 for 15 minutes of my companionship. That's about the average cost. Here's the other thing about Charlotte right now. What's something big going on in Charlotte this weekend? Yeah. Our average site online, it's out there now, Backpage. We have about 100 and 150 hits a day on Backpage on an average day. I started counting today our Backpage postings. Anybody know what Backpage is? I need to say, it's a site where basically you can legally sell sex. Anyway, that's what it is. And I stopped counting at 250 posts today. Anybody have an idea why there's 250 today when last week, this time, there was about 150?
It was a game.
More men and women.
Who said it over there? Demand. If I'm selling a product, I'm going to go where I can make the most money because there's more people. Here's the difference between about me and drugs. Drugs run out. I don't run out. Fair enough? So, mom ends up going back into the life. She's a single mom. And I am now being dropped off by my school bus at my mom's strip club. So at the age of 3, I'm being dropped off. So my vulnerability got me enslaved, but here's what keeps people enslaved. Shame keeps them enslaved. The school bus would drop me off. At this point, there's been so much sexual stuff that I believe this is my value and worth. I was introduced to you as Lainey. My birth name is LaLania. You guys are all very young. But does anybody know the guy named Donovan? Yeah. The singer. So my name is LaLania, and it's from a song in the late 60s. And that song, do you know what that song's about? It's about a prostitute. And this is what I love about my name. I get to do what I do today and go in your face, Satan, because what you thought I would be, I'm not a prostitute. I get to defend and be a warrior for those who are prostituting. Little tidbit, my education comes in with my teaching or telling my story. I never say someone's a prostitute. I often say I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I have 3 kids. Actually, oh my gosh, I have 4 children. I have 3 boys and a little Chinese princess. But that's not who I am. That doesn't define who I am. I am a Christian. I'm unashamed of that. And I've learned to allow God to define who I am. So I am a warrior. I've been set free. I'm lovable. I'm wanted. And I'm well on my way towards wholeness. So when we look at a woman and we say she's a prostitute, we are once again enslaving her into finding who she is. What I do in my training is I go, she's someone who prostitutes. It's what she does. And the reason I say that is there's such a stigma. If I were to ask for adjectives for the word prostitute, what are some adjectives you would give me? I need someone to tell me when I have 10 minutes left. What are some adjectives, quickly? And no Christian words here. Slut. Good job. Anna, what's a word for prostitute? Adjective. Whore. Sleazy. Nasty. And it's nasty. That's how we say it. What else?
Skank.
Huh?
Skank.
Skank. Cheap. Hoe. By the way, in the life, that's an affectionate name. So if you're ever helping somebody and they go, my hoe, that's like going, my boo. You know, so when we're mirroring back behavior, we're not going to call them hoe, but we're not going to make a big deal about that. Absolutely. Well, here's my next question for you. If I were to say a 7-year-old who is in the strip club doing lap dances with men taking me in the back, blowing their stuff in my face, doing different things, and I'm trying to be really respectful up there. So, what were some adjectives you would give about me?
Helpless.
It would be. Interesting.
Helpless.
Helpless. We're talking about an 8-year-old abused,
Manipulated.
manipulated. Any others?
Used.
Used. Does anybody feel bad for that 7-year-old?
Victim.
Molested. Well, what would I tell you? We work with women who prostitute. What if I were to tell you that I've not met a single one? I've helped over 200 women in the last 15 years. If I were to tell you that everyone who would be legally considered a prostitute were exactly me, would that change our definition when we look at her at the age of 18, 19, 20 and prostituting? I would love for us to change the way we look at people. So anyway, we'll get back to me so I don't run out of time. So at this point, I'm at the strip club. At this point, my vulnerabilities were things like, I have no value and worth. I'm worthless. I'm a piece of meat. I felt very filthy, very dirty. I wanted to be a good girl because I was known as Peggy's good little girl. So who doesn't want to be that good girl, right? So my definition of being a good girl meant I had to do something sexually to somebody else. Do you know the other thing that these people would say all the time to me? What would somebody be saying in some of these instances?
Do you like it?
I didn't get, did you like it? But I will tell you on something like, well, I'll get later on my story. You know, possibly. I probably blocked some of that stuff out. What else?
Just like your mom?
But that would be an affectionate thing if they did it that way, yeah. What else? How about I love you? How about affectionate terms? Here's the deal. If they were mean and cruel and nasty to me, I don't know that I would not have said something or been as favorable. It's not like they're standing over you and going, you slut, you're going to give me what I want. Now that ends up happening the longer you're in there and you're buying time because we don't do that. But at this place, at this time, they're trying to win me over. One of the reasons is they don't want me to say anything to anybody. But here's the crazy thing, I would not have said a single word to anybody. And you're gonna hear as I go on, this happened until I was 17, and I never spoke about it until about 5 years ago. Why would that be? Knowing what you know of my story at this point, only up until the age of 7, 8, 10 years old, why at this point would I not say anything to anybody? Embarrassed, absolutely.
Protect the secret.
I don't know that I loved it.
Protect the secret in your mother.
Shame. There was a part that I wanted to protect my mom. My mom didn't know a lot of what happened to me there. I have a hard time when people say my mom trafficked me. And maybe I need some more healing. My mom gained nothing from what happened there. What happened at 3?
You went into foster care.
What was taken away from me? We talked about my innocence. What else was taken? And Anna, if they don't answer soon.
Your
And
mom.
we're talking about why I'm not saying anything to anybody.
Well, you don't have anybody
My
that
They might
voice.
take your
My voice. What's going to happen if I say something?
stuff get taken away.
Here's the deal about value. I believed that people valued good girls, innocent girls. We talk about we don't have sex till we get married. And I've got to tell them that I've already have had sex. Now at this point, I really didn't even know
How do you know what
sex at that
is?
point of what that was. So yeah, my voice was completely stolen. During one of the summers, we did the truck stop routes. I did not work because I think my mom would have killed somebody. But what we would do on the truck stop routes, we went with a guy named Wooden Nickel. And here's the deal, this was kind of adventuresome and fun for someone that's all she knew. I got to go, remember we were poor, so I got to go to all the gas stations, pick whatever candy I wanted, whatever food I wanted. If I wanted souvenirs from the different places, I got all of that. Now mind you, at this point I'm probably 10 or 11 years old. Think of a 10 or 11-year-old in your life right now. What happens when you buy them that huge lollipop from Savannah here, and you give it to them? That's like winning the lottery to a 10-year-old, right? So you kind of start overlooking some of the things that are happening because you're getting something. I really want you guys to change some of your perspective of how to look at these victims. So we would stop there. I learned quickly that you never go into the showers at the truck stops. I learned that you never go to the restrooms by yourself. I am now married in my 20s, and we had stopped at a truck stop, and I asked my husband if he was going to walk me to the bathroom. He goes, "What?" And I'm like, "Aren't you going to walk me to the bathroom? You never go to the bathroom at a truck stop by yourself." He's like, "What are you talking about?" At this point, I hadn't started talking about my story, and I almost didn't even know it was ingrained as part of who I was. So at the truck stops, what would happen was Mom would tuck me into the cab of the truck, and I knew darn well what was happening, and I would pretend that I didn't know what was happening. Mom would then knock on the cabs of the cars, on the trucks, go inside. There was times that there were showers done. She would come back, and we would move on to the next stop. So truck stopping happens a lot, and it's pretty prevalent still. A lot of the women we've helped, actually, most of our truck stop ladies that I've helped have actually come through South Carolina. I think South Carolina is misidentified with their numbers, because I think they're getting busted in Charlotte and North Carolina, and they're getting the credit for the numbers. Not to say that this isn't there, but they're coming from y'all's state. Oh wait, we're not in South Carolina, my bad, but we're close enough, right? So that happens. At the age of 12, Mom kicks me out of the house. At this point, I can't even tell you how many people have raped me. And at this point, that is what my purpose is. Kicked out in the streets, the last thing I want to do is back in foster care. I end up back in foster care. Before I go into my next stint in foster care, what was the trafficking? 10 minutes? Or am I done? Oh, Judy Pickle. Okay. What was the trafficking? Our trafficking guys. What was my trafficking at the strip club? Our legal people. All right, anybody? What was the trafficking by legal terms at the strip club? So somebody's got it. It's got to be a commercial act. Who was the one gaining the finances from me?
The owner.
Right. It was known. I worked at that strip club. Well, a bunch of the strip clubs in that area for 3 to 4 years. Do you think it's known that there's an underage person at those strip clubs?
Yeah.
So that goes on. I'm in foster care. I'm gonna try to speed it up. They end up having a man that lived there. I was also there with another girl. The other girl was never propositioned by this guy, but I would end up being raped 3 to 4 times every week by the guy there. This is what he would tell me. He would say if I said anything, that he would tell my foster parents, and I would be kicked out. There's a word I hate when people say, and it's called survival sex. I simply slept with him so I would not be homeless. That happens until I'm almost 17 years old. I've decided enough is enough, and I'm going to get out. I got 3 jobs, got my own car, ended up getting my own place, graduated high school on my own, and was out. So at this point, people would say that my slavery ended. I would tell you my slavery did not end. So Candy, you are now out. Try to be free. Yeah. Oh, you don't try too hard. Although I think you did try hard. So this is how I was set free. It's people like what we do at Redeeming Joy. I now have an organization where we help women who are trafficked, and we offer them the services. We've got to go back to that 3-year-old little girl and start fixing those wounds so she doesn't end up back in that life. So I'm going to talk real loud. Can everybody hear me? And this is when we come up to a Candy and we go, Candy, I'm so sorry that happened to me. Nobody should ever treat somebody that way. You know what, Candy? You are far more than anything that ever happened to you. You're far more than anything anybody has said that you are. Those things that they say that who you are is not who you are. And you know what, Candy? I'm so sorry that happened to you. You know what? Those feelings of wanting to kill yourself, you know what it drives me nuts? You know, it's so many women that often addiction is a big deal. You know what, Candy? I'm so sorry. I would do that too. We've seen so many women that have addiction. If you want help, you got to do it. It's okay. It's okay. You're not that different. You're a million you're not that. So if you want that, at this point, Candy is not in our house per se. I'm building a relationship and having her own process. We're empowering these women to go out and help set themselves free. We're loaning our hope so they have hope on their own. I had to do counseling. Who's that counselor? You know those nightmares and those night terrors you have? It's no wonder you have them. So much trauma. We do neuro remapping where we map the brains of our women, and literally it shows the women without any explanation of what your past is, that there's wounds and hurts, that your brain is truly physiologically affected. But this is something I know. Again, I'm a Christian, so you can block this out, but it's true. Science has caught up with God. God says we can renew our mind. No matter how many times I tell her that she is okay. I'm okay and I'm safe. If my brain is constantly in that fight or flight, if I'm in that fight or flight place, I'm not going to sleep. And so we do things together. You know what? You're the safe place that you can stay and live, and you have all the things. You will be there until you and what I know there is a great future for you. You don't ever have to go back to it. So that's what we do. And you know what? She still has machine. Here's the deal, we can prosecute these men all day long, and we need to continue to do that. And our law officers are doing, or all of our law people are really moving in the right direction. We prosecute these men, they go to jail, they serve their time, and they're done. But the women, for the rest of their lives, are going to be struggling with this. We need you guys. Remember I said if you come here and you're made aware and you don't do anything, you're helping keep those chains on her. If you go out and you look at a woman that you would say, oh my gosh, she's skinny, and you give her a smile going, you know what, I wonder what those wounds and hurts are, you may have just released a chain from her and helped. And I'm not going to be unashamed. We need a large house so we can help more women like this. So that's me. My name is Lainey. I've been set free. I am well on my way towards wholeness. Thank you. Questions, you gotta talk loud. Yes.
I know you have your service dog, as a form of coping method. Is there, other things you do? I know counseling and therapy, but is there another, avenue that you use to, cope with what has happened in your life?
I still go to counseling. Every time I speak, the 2 days leading before, I've got people who are mentoring and helping me. And the next 3 days, I'll have people speaking. I had a night terror last night from it. And that's why I say I have got to go. Is it worth me sharing my story? I will stop sharing my story if I share it and people don't do anything. But I've got to believe that you're going to do something. Beautiful in the back.
Yes, thank you for your story. How can we contact you?
Redeemingjoy.org. Oh my gosh, I forgot to tell you the most amazing part of my story. 12 years ago, I went back and rescued my mom, who at the age of 47 was still in the life. That's disassociating that I was just hey, you can tell me that that's what I forget. Yes, 47, my mom was still VIPing and strip clubbing. Mom became very well known and was making lots of money. So redeemingjoy.org, like us on Facebook, do all of that, share us, give us lots of money in a really large house, and there's other things you can do too, but that's the big one.
They involve you with the use of drugs.
I didn't do drugs because I saw so much of what my mom did, and I know that I was meant to do what I do today, and I think God spared me. I wake up every day, this is crazy, I wake up every day grateful for what happened to me. God has not wasted a single moment, and I can sit in front of a woman and share what I share with her from a place of relatability. So I did not everybody does, but there are addictions, whether they're not drugs. Oftentimes, the 4 ladies we're helping currently, only one has a drug addiction. The other 3 are addicted to sex and the money, and that was created from the lifestyle.
All right, so you mentioned that you entered the life at an early age. So what did your education look like? Did you finish school, go back to school, go to college, become a service provider? Like, what does that record look like for you?
So I graduated high school. I met my husband. We've been together now 25 years. I did not have the confidence. I didn't have the money, first of all. I was ward of the state. I didn't finish because I had to work and do that. I would love to go back to school. So I went to college for about 1.5 years.
So when you got out of the life, how long did it take you to stay on this side as opposed to going back? Did you go back once you got away? What was the process, the transition process? Did you go
That's
back?
an excellent question. You must have some education. I did not go back to the sexual part of it. I go back to I'm worthless, I'm not lovable, sabotaging, making myself look awful in front of other people to make them feel better. But again, I believe that's because I was created to do what I do. That harm wasn't created for me to do what I do, but who I am was. Often these women do go back, and that's why if our identity is not defined, they are going to go back. It's ridiculous. the rate of them going back. But I'm gonna keep coming back to them each and every time, because I know they can get out of this. I've seen it happen to too many women. So I didn't go back to the sex part, but the lies and the value and things that I was identified are probably my biggest chains that I do. So I know truth, but I struggle with those.
Thank you for sharing your story and creating an avenue to help others. That's very important. My question is, since you're a mother of how old is your daughter, may I ask?
She is gonna be 11.
Okay, is there overprotection with her?
Oh, darn skippity. Yes, and I will say my PTSD has increased. I completely disassociated from my story until I started seeing myself and my daughter. I'll tell you what happened. I used to get her ready for school, and she pushed her little pelvis forward for me to take her pajamas off. And all of a sudden, I was that little girl, and for the first time I said, that should have never happened to me. And I was well into my 30s. So, am I protective? Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, if you look around, most of the people that have come up here today, I think it's evident to say that, you know, we've had victims, we've had local, state, federal law enforcement, Attorney General, U.S. Attorney's Office, even the media, and all of you. Clearly, it takes a team to really tackle this problem. So I hope that, you know, seeing every angle of it, it really is a community effort. We're gonna transition now to our panelists. Go back to our similar to what we did earlier before the break. I want to introduce Savannah Working Against Human Trafficking SWAT, Deidre Harrison, the president. SWAT's mission is to eradicate the crime of human trafficking in Savannah and its environs by serving as a forum for developing community strategies and protocols for helping identify victims. Mr. Thomas Gillen, founder and director of the National Institute for Human Trafficking Research. Mr. Greg Galui, with the Assistant United States Attorney, the federal prosecutor who was involved with Operation Dark Night 2 years ago, helping to dismantle the largest sex trafficking operation that has ever existed in Savannah. And then Ms. Keisha Gibson Carter from the Rape Crisis Center, Executive Director of the Rape Crisis Center. She's been involved with providing services to victims and citizens for 25 years. And last but not least, Ms. Tanya Gruber. Is she here? Also with Assistant U.S. Attorney's Office, point of contact for human trafficking cases. Let's give them all a round of applause. So we'll just pick up where we left off earlier. Talk a little bit about the myths of human trafficking.
I think in my experience, the myths of human, I'll talk to you about a couple of them. I think that one of the myths is that people are physically confined or shackled. And I think that as we all know from listening today from victims and from us earlier, that most of the shackles are mental and emotional shackles, and that people aren't physically confined against their will. They're mentally confined against their will. Another myth, I think, is people don't realize how much is going on. I think a lot of people think that human trafficking and sex trafficking only takes place in big cities when big events are taking place, or just in major cities. And I think we've debunked that to an extent today, talking about the fact that it's taken place in our own backyard, and it's taken place in the backyard of many other towns and cities throughout the United States and the world. Those are two major myths. I'll pass on the mic.
I think another myth is that victims are self-identified as a victim, and so it takes time, as we just heard from our last speaker, it takes time for someone who's been through such a traumatic lifestyle. It takes time to open up and share their story, and so sometimes these cases are hard to investigate because it takes time. They're not running. Many victims don't just run to law enforcement's door and say, "This is what's happening to me," make it stop. And so we need to take a victim-centered approach in our investigation to offer victim resources and get them first stabilized and meet basic needs before we can move on to prosecution.
I think one of the myths that I see, and we've already talked a little bit about this, that people can just walk away from this life. It doesn't matter whether you're a victim of sex trafficking, whether you're a forced labor victim, or domestic minor sex trafficking victim. That for a lot of people, we look and we say, well, why couldn't she just walk away? Or sometimes we say, it's their own fault for getting themselves in that situation. And I'm here to tell you that most of the victims that I've worked with throughout my career, it was not their fault. They were taken advantage of. They had those vulnerabilities that were talked about earlier today. And we need to really open our eyes to that these folks have done nothing wrong, that someone else has taken advantage of them. The second myth that always comes up with me is, well, she's making money from it, or he's making money from it. And the victim does not make anything from it. In fact, they get hurt from it. The person who's making the money is, in sex trafficking, it would be the pimp. In labor trafficking, it would be the person who owns the company that's providing the services, maybe housekeeping services through a contract with a hotel, maybe our farm worker communities. The people at the top are the ones making the money from it. And this crime of human trafficking is about one thing and one thing only. That is greed. Greed.
I would say, agreeing with Ms. Gruber about victim self-identification, is that oftentimes it takes the power of somebody on the outside to report a crime or suspicious activity, because the victim is not going to see themselves as a victim. So I always say with SWAT, one of the quotes I use is from Harriet Tubman, is that she said, "I freed hundreds of slaves, but I could have freed hundreds more had they known they were slaves." And I think there's a common misconception, and I think that puts a lot of power onto the community to identify the illegal activity, as we saw with Operation Dark Knight.
I would agree with most of the panelists and also acknowledge that the same stigmas that are associated with victims of rape and sexual violence are consistent with the stigma and the myths that come with sex trafficking. As lay individuals, we often have a tendency to believe that somehow the victim brought it upon themselves, and that they should not have run away, or because they are truant. Those are some of the reasons that they may have invited this into their lives.
Can you explain what a victim-centered approach is?
One of the things that we look at when we look at the crime of human trafficking, there are actually, I call it a collaboration, and there must be a collaboration of help. The first group of people that I put at the top of the list is everybody in this room. You all have eyes and ears to see. HHS, Health and Human Services of our federal government, they produce a group of posters and brochures, and it says one of the things that we must do is look beneath the surface. So if you're the first group of people that would report this, and you would call a 1-800 phone number that goes to a group called Polaris out of Washington, D.C., and they will respond to that. The next group of people that would come and play would be law enforcement. Now, the job of law enforcement is to investigate, see what's going on, maybe do a surveillance, gather the information, rescue the victim, and then help with the prosecution of the case. Then the third group of people that would collaborate in this group effort would be our social service providers. These are the men and women that work for all different types of organizations, mostly nonprofits, and they provide services to the victim. Now let me say this, and make this very, very clearly. Without the help of every one of those folks that I just talked about, the victim is going to have a very difficult time getting the help that they need. Each of those people that I mentioned play a very important part in this. Once we get to the stage of prosecution, the prosecutors need all of those people to be a part of it. And that gives hope to the victim. And the victim is able then to sit in a courtroom and maybe point out the perpetrator, the person that did this to him or her. And that's when we finally make the case. So it is definitely a work of collaboration between many people, and it starts with you.
Can we talk a little bit about those victims, especially when they're arrested? Do y'all find oftentimes that if they're arrested based on prostitution, that y'all find that they're actually being victimized? Does that happen?
Sadly, it is a reality at times that victims have been arrested, and it's rare that you can speak for a whole community, but I'm pretty confident I can speak for all of law enforcement that we never, ever, ever want to arrest a victim. But I think when you begin to hear throughout the day that it's hard at first, when you first look at this crime without digging deeper, to realize what's going on. I've had multiple cases where the traffickers force victims to also traffic other victims. And it's for their own safety and survival that they are forced to act like a trafficker. They have to bring in their friends from school, or they have to recruit other women, and they help assist with the beatings and the bleach in the eye and the burns, and they have to do this to their friends because they are also suffering at the hands of the traffickers. And so someone who is not able to sit down and trust law enforcement and tell their whole story, we're not going to know at first when we first knock on the door and open the door and see what we have. And so it takes time. And so sadly, at times, victims may be arrested on the surface until we get to the whole story. And so that's something that we're working with on a national level and a local level to make sure everyone understands the dynamics of human trafficking, because it's a multifaceted problem, and we need to teach our law enforcement about it so we can recognize it.
Do you think it's possible? Is it ever mislabeled? I mean, or undetected? I mean, are there a lot of? Do you think more cases than not it's usually human trafficking versus prostitution?
Involving, with prostitution, I think until recently, I would say within the last 10 years, there's been more outreach and education to identify the differences between those who are victims, but it still happens. And even while SWAT is mainly for education and awareness, we do go out to the community, and when we talk to different providers, either from legal settings or medical, and then they tell us about a case, maybe a brothel case, or maybe someone who was in the life who came in for emergency services, who was going to be detained. And it happens frequently to this day. In fact, there were issues with cases right after local law enforcement trainings, and this is happening throughout. They could receive the training and a case could be missed, either where a victim might not self-identify. Now, there's a very limited time to where if they say they're a victim of a crime, and the law enforcement officials are limited either with support services on site or with taking that word in that time on how to treat that certain case. So there's different perspectives within every agency to consider, but it does happen locally as well as worldwide. When we talk about the labor trafficking side, it is still much more prevalent. Of course, the severe cases when we're talking about domestic minors or with sex trafficking in general, that it's much more severe abuse. But when we think about the labor trafficking, we're dealing with either a non-voting population, the immigrant community, or those who are in severe poverty, who can be repeatedly exploited for labor and don't understand what type of rights and responsibilities they have if they're a victim in a crime. And they might not be detained for illegal activity on their own part, but it could be a repeated crime against them because they might not have the same type of voice or the same type of support available in different settings towards those who are victims of sex trafficking.
Which just leads me, what are the different types of human trafficking? I'm sure we kind of talked about a little bit here and there today, but.
Well, you've got forced labor. In my state, the state of Florida, forced labor is probably the top crime when we talk about human trafficking. And right now, one in a close second is sex trafficking. When we talk about sex trafficking, we talk about adult sex trafficking, and we talk about domestic minor sex trafficking. Just to give you a little idea of the difference between the two, an adult is anybody over the age of 18 forced into sex trafficking crime. Anybody who is a domestic minor sex trafficking victim would be someone under the age of 18. When we speak about the law and prosecuting these two different types of crimes, under federal law, we have to prove force, fraud, and coercion when the victim is an adult. When the victim is a youth or juvenile or minor, whatever label you want to put on that person, we no longer have to prove force, fraud, or coercion. In some states right now, they are looking at juveniles, and even if a police officer arrests that juvenile for prostitution, in some states we're not even looking at that as a crime. They are actually a victim because somebody forced them to do what they're doing. And then we've got domestic servitude. That's another area of human trafficking, where someone might be, let's say, brought here from another country, maybe Mexico, Honduras, Guatemala, and they go to work for a wealthy person, and they live in their home. They care for the children, they keep the house clean, they cook, prepare all the meals, but they're never allowed to leave the home. Never. Not even allowed to go out in the backyard. So you have many different types of human trafficking when we look at the big picture, and they're broken down into that area. Now, let me say something about a story or about a case that I worked in South Florida. It actually started in Haiti with a young girl who was brought through an adoption agency to South Florida through a husband and wife who actually ran the adoption agency in Haiti, but they also had ties to South Florida. This young girl was brought here at the age of 5 years old through the adoption agency. And when she turned 7, this couple forced her into what we call domestic servitude. 7-year-old girl cooking, keeping the house clean, not allowed to watch television, not allowed to listen to the radio, not allowed to have any contact with the outside. And she was also not allowed to use the bathroom. She took showers in the backyard with the garden hose. They took 2x4s and built a small cover area with black trash bags to kind of protect her so she could go out back and take a shower. This young girl worked from 6 o'clock in the morning till sometimes 2 o'clock the next morning. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 hours a day. And eventually, when she became old enough, they turned her into a sex trafficker. So a lot of times, forced labor, domestic servitude will turn into sex trafficking. We really have to keep our eyes on for all of those different areas.
Talk a little bit about the laws that are protecting victims of human trafficking.
Well, I know on an international level, Greg mentioned about this earlier on the panel discussion, is if a person is in this country illegally, and put aside and whatever you feel about immigration, I mean, that's a whole separate issue. This issue is how a person should be treated as a human being. But once a person is in this country illegally, and they are a legally recognized victim of human trafficking, Congress has provided us tools to allow them to remain in this country lawfully while we go through the prosecution of the case. And for safety reasons, if there's family members in another country and that their family needs to be protected because of threats or actual violence, we also have tools to bring their family over and to make sure everyone's safe while the case is being investigated.
I'm just going to add a couple things to that. There's actually a federal law, it's the TVPA, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. That law has not been around a long time. In fact, just about 16 years now. It was put into effect in 2000 through the federal government. And as we developed that federal law, many states throughout the United States started to develop their own state statutes and rules and regulations and laws against human trafficking. So in many states throughout the United States, and your state is one of those, Georgia, my state that I live in Florida right now, we have very strict rules. Most of our local state statutes mirror the federal law. The only real difference that I see in a lot of areas is the sentencing guidelines. When a perpetrator is taken to court under the federal law, the sentencing guidelines seem to be just a little bit stronger, higher. But as someone said a little bit earlier today, we are doing statewide cases, and people are getting life sentences for this crime of human trafficking. So you must remember that we have a federal law as well as a state law.
I put Rape Crisis Center on the spot. What have y'all had to deal with human trafficking cases coming to y'all's office, and how do y'all deal with them?
Thank you, Elizabeth. I want to go back to also the victim-centered approach you mentioned earlier, because I think it's important for us to acknowledge as agents of the Rape Crisis Center that with regard to the victim-centered approach, we essentially start where the victim is. So before we are concerned or get involved in the investigative process at all, we start with non-judgment, not judging the individual for whatever the scenario is, but essentially treating them where they are as they are presented to us. In addition to that, offering support and help rather than judgment. At the Rape Crisis Center, in the last 3 years that I have been the executive director, we've only had one set of victims come to us as a result of sex trafficking. And there have been multiple stings, I understand, that have occurred in our community. So that's a little bit disappointing, particularly acknowledging that the support that we were able to provide to the last 3 victims, if our services were not received by those individuals that evening, I can only imagine what would have happened to one of the young ladies, in that the egregious nature of what was presented to us, the things our forensics evidence collection nurses were able to uncover, I cannot imagine any 12-year-old child experiencing that. So I would like to see greater support and greater care taken with the victims when these things do take place. having law enforcement bring them to the Rape Crisis Center to receive support by way of a gynecological exam where they can be treated for post-exposure to sexually transmitted diseases, as well as that immediate crisis intervention support. We right now have 3 cases in progress, which is very unusual for the Rape Crisis Center, so I'm not being rude checking my phone. It's just, I'm trying to run interference here. So that's essentially where we are. We are uniquely poised in position to provide wraparound services and care to victims. However, the niche that needs to be filled with regard to the support is the aftercare. What happens to the victim after the examination is complete? What happens to the victim after we have given them information relative to our resources and services? And that was the most disappointing scenario that played out after we served the victims this past fall, where not, of the 3 victims, only 1 parent came, and that parent that came was not willing to take the child back home with her. And the 2 other victims were just essentially left in the lurch. After law enforcement finished, after my nurse finished, my advocates were left with these 2 females under the age of 14 years old. They are essentially throwaways. No one cared. There was no concern for them. And so I think that's where the conversation should start relative to prevention. How do we respond to the individuals who are in the situation before they get to us if we can't even provide support to them after they leave us?
I got raped, and nurse took a rape kit test, and I specifically asked her, I said, do you see the semen? She used the black light. She said, yes. Her name was Bridget. And she said, yes, I see you. She took the test, and then she and a sheriff, one of the sheriffs that came in the office, took the kid upstairs in another part of the hospital, and they went upstairs with the rape kit. It took them 6 or 7 months to bring the rape kit back to tell me what the result was. When it came back negative, no evidence of rape, no evidence at all. They said they see no evidence, nothing, no semen, no nothing. So, but when she shined the light up there, she told me she saw the semen. But yesterday when the test come back, it said no evidence. So, I mean, somebody's lying. What happened? Why did she take the test out of the room?
Yes, ma'am, I understand exactly what you said. As you know, I'm well familiar with the case, but I don't think that this is the platform to discuss that. I'm so sorry.
I think it's questionable. I think it is questionable.
Okay, so to answer your question, our nurses cannot determine if a person in fact has been raped.
She didn't determine. She said she saw the semen, and that was questionable enough.
We can't do that, ma'am, but right now, I really don't think that this is the platform for that.
You are a nurse. You work for the health department, and you are a rape crisis prevention person, and you should be able to answer that question. I do feel that you should.
I'm so sorry, ma'am, but I can't.
Okay, well, I'll let it go.
Obviously, there's a lot of agencies involved in trying to tackle this issue. What do you think is the most important thing that each agency can be doing and working together? Because there's a lot of moving parts, and communication is key when it comes to these things.
I essentially see where we are today in a reactionary position, and I applaud the reaction to sex trafficking in our community. Realizing where we are in our society, I think it's very important that we are here gathered at this platform to respond to that. But at the Rape Crisis Center, I'm so pleased that we work for an organization that's both reactive in that we respond to victims of rape and sexual violence when it occurs, working in tandem with law enforcement as it occurs. However, our organization is also very, very busy with regard to proaction and prevention activity, whereby we go into our local schools, into our communities, as well as our colleges and universities, pushing information, education, and curriculum with regard to prevention. How do we prevent this? With regard to sex trafficking, When you talk about prevention, you talk about those who are among us who are of the least, the lost, the last, and the left out. And these are the individuals who are most vulnerable with regard to poverty and the lack of education and the lack of access to things like specialty programs when it comes to our academies, our magnet schools, our private schools. So really going back to the root and seeing that we are living in a time and in a community, you know, we are in the weekend of Dr. Martin Luther King's holiday celebration, where in our local schools here in Chatham County and throughout our state, I would imagine, that we are on a slippery slope to segregated schools,
Right.
Under the guise of academies and specialty programs and magnet schools. And if you continue to push these kids out who are already impoverished, who already come from broken homes, and when they get into the schools that we have, that our tax dollars pay for in this district, and you can't get into that corridor where there's been a distinct separation in the school, whereby you have a group of kids over here with a certain ability separated from a group of kids with a different ability. And the fact of the matter is, it's not about ability, it's about race and economic status. Because at second grade, all kids start at the same level. And so by the 11th grade, because you've given this group of kids more access to better teachers, you got the best teachers in our community working with the best kids who are coming from the better homes and who have better access. And if we continue to do that, these are the kids who we increase the volatility of these kids going to the street, becoming runaways, going into the foster care system. So we have to start at the root. And if we don't start at the root, we're going to continue to be on platforms like this where we're just talking about it, because after we talk about it, it's only going to be down to a couple of us who are really going to do something about it.
All right, thank you, thank you.
I think one of the things that we're doing, and one of the things that we can improve is education. I mean, it's not just, again, it's people aren't aware of how much of this is going on, and I think that talking in public forums is a step in the right direction. I think talking at schools, not only to administrators and nurses, but also to students, caution. It's not necessarily sex trafficking, but cautioning them about social media and about posting photos that can go viral instantly and result in cyberbullying, as well as all kinds of other issues. Talking to kids, also talking to hospital staff, law enforcement. I mean, there are lots of ways we can improve tackling the whole problem of sex trafficking. I mean, but training is key, and making people aware of how to identify it and how to take it down, I think is key.
We talked a little bit about cities earlier, Atlanta being, I know, one of the major cities, especially with the airport. How much of an impact does Atlanta have on Savannah as far as bringing sex trafficking here, or is it coming from everywhere?
I think, in my experience, it's coming from everywhere. I think Atlanta has received a lot of national attention. In fact, some people have said Atlanta is one of the capitals when it comes to the sex trafficking world. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that Atlanta and Georgia in general were very aggressive with going after sex trafficking, and our numbers are higher because we identify it. We spend a lot of time identifying it and prosecuting it on the state and federal level. So statistically, it looks like there's more in Atlanta than anywhere else. But I do believe that it's in the small cities just as prevalent as the big cities, in my experience.
It's not only the sex trafficking, it's all forms of trafficking. When we talk about Georgia, just like we talk about Florida, we got a big agricultural area in both of these states. So we see an influx of people being moved throughout the state. In my state of Florida, we have Immokalee, Florida, which is down around the southwest section of the state. It's the largest tomato capital of the world, supposedly. But that's not the only place where tomatoes are picked. So what they do is they move these people from place to place to place. And they do the same thing with our sex trafficking victims. They move them sometimes from city to city to city. So a girl might be in Atlanta this week, but next week she might be here in Savannah. Following week, she might be in my hometown of Orlando, Florida. So people are being moved around from place to place to place. There's one thing that you have to always keep in mind. Anywhere, any city, any town, any place, you have active things happening, such as tourism. Savannah's a tourist town. Agriculture. Georgia is an agricultural state. Wealthy people. You can have victims of domestic servitude. Anytime you have all of those things, or any of those things, one of those things, you're going to have human trafficking. There will always be someone that wants to take advantage of another human being and make money on that person. Doesn't matter if they're an undocumented person from another country or a local person. It's all about greed, control, and power. One of the things that I just want to mention is, so people here that are attending today can maybe understand this a little bit better. When you talk about human trafficking, a lot of times you look at that and you say, well, that can't be happening here in Savannah. I had that mindset in Orlando, Florida in 2004 when my boss came to me and said we were going to do something about this. I said, it's not happening here. He told me this: every single person needs to educate yourself. After you leave here today, ladies and gentlemen, you just can't leave and forget about today. You've got to continue to educate yourself. You've got to keep your eyes and ears open. And you can make a difference. Each and every person in this room can truly make a difference.
I know a lot of our, even local law enforcement, has gone through training to identify, these types of situations. What are some of the things that they are being trained to do and that's different than what they already received training?
Well, I'm not absolutely positive about your state of Georgia, but I know what we did in Florida. About 7 years ago, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, which is our state agency that provides training for law enforcement officers, we put together an 8-hour curriculum for brand new police recruits. These are the new men and women that are coming into your police agencies all throughout the state of Florida. It's mandatory that they receive an 8-hour block of training. For investigators, we provide them with a 40-hour block of training, which is also a pay incentive training, so they actually take the class and they can get a little raise out of the deal. So we're training more people. But the people that we're forgetting about, especially in law enforcement, are the seasoned officers, the men and women that have been working in this field for years, and they don't have the opportunity to go take a class. And what we're trying to do with my organization is we're trying to train every law enforcement agency across the country. Doesn't matter whether you've been with the agency for a year or you've been with the agency for 25 years. We feel that all law enforcement, whether they be local, state, or federal, they need to understand this crime. Somebody said to me last night while we attended a dinner that human trafficking is the new buzzword in law enforcement right now. Back in 2001, you all remember what happened on 9/11, September 11th, 2001? Terrorism came to our country, and that was the big buzzword back then. Now human trafficking is that buzzword, and more people are recognizing this crime, and they're getting involved and they're trying to make a difference, whether it be you as an individual, whether it be me as somebody who does research and works closely with law enforcement, or whether it's our prosecutors. I also heard this morning that you're going to do this in Georgia this coming year by the Attorney General mentioned this morning that attorneys need training in this, judges need training in this, so they have a better idea of what they're dealing with. So I think everyone needs training.
So speaking about the state of Georgia and locally in Savannah, so in 2014, GBI and Georgia State published some data, which was a survey with the local law enforcement agencies throughout the state. And 68% of those that had responded, and they had a high turnout on the survey, 68% of law enforcement officials believed that minors found in prostitution were criminals, which was around the same time that our local legislators changed the age of consent from 16 to 18. So and we're talking about the majority of these law enforcement agencies being rural. And so in SWAT, we have trained different agencies, local, urban, suburban, rural. And we can't forget that these crimes happen everywhere. And they don't just happen to the kids in our neighborhoods, they could happen to those who are undocumented, so that they fear that if they are apprehended, their immigration status is going to be the biggest factor, which is usually what is the largest power play against them by their traffickers or by their boss that's oppressing them. So we have to consider the misconceptions that may happen with the local law enforcement agencies, and consider that with how the curriculum is built. In September of last year, the Savannah Metro had a 4-day training, which happened in 4-hour shifts, so that those who were seasoned and those who were new received a training, although it was short and it was specifically regarding domestic minor sex trafficking. So there was a limited focus, which could then narrow the scope of what a law enforcement official sees. But we also have to remember that what they might see and what is reported is only really from the eyes and ears of the community, which is the majority of those who are seeing the suspicious activity. The other thing to note is that SWAT, we do provide advocacy to our legislators, and one of the key factors that we are advocating for is to mandate the training either through GBI, which is one of the main trainers for state and local law enforcement agencies here in Georgia, to provide all robust, comprehensive training on what human trafficking is and how to respond. I think that it's very important. What had happened right after the training, and I know Keisha had touched on this with different cases in the past on the lack of maybe that facilitation with local law enforcement, is that the pimp was charged with human trafficking at a local level, but there were 6 women who were apprehended for prostitution. And then mothers of these adult women were coming forward saying that they came from Phoenix, that they came from Texas, that these were not local women. So they had been going place to place, but now they're over 18 and being seen as criminals, although they've been living in the life for maybe almost a decade. So there's a clear need not only for that relationship between the service providers. Had the service providers been available, how would that have prevented now these women from having their pictures showing them as criminals in Savannah? Because even if their charges would have been dropped, someone could look up their name and see that they were charged for prostitution.
Take about 5 minutes for any questions.
Okay, hey, I'm Anna. I'm speaking in like the next session. I'm not as familiar with what George is doing, but something in the survivor population that we're pushing is for survivor leadership, because oftentimes what people want us for is just our story, which I'm grateful to be here to do and have no problem doing. But a lot of times, like legislators, attorneys will ask me to come talk to them as a consultant to offer advising on certain things, because they see me as more than my story. And I'm really grateful for the work that you're doing, but do you have anything going on that you're like having programs for survivors to become leaders, or having them on your staff, or can you if you are, do you have any suggestions or anything like that for other programs that are trying to have survivors come talk to their own organizations?
I think that's a great idea. We haven't entertained that piece. However, we have made steps to collaborating with some of our community organizations with like services like shelter services, counseling and outreach services to partner to see how we can implement a safe house here in Savannah. I think between here and Macon, Atlanta and Macon, there aren't any safe houses for our victims. So the extent of our response out of these sex trafficking summits is to be able to respond to provide expansive victim services. I think that's a great idea. I hadn't thought about
that part, yeah.
I would have to agree with Keisha, and this has been identified by the district attorney, Meg Heap, and as well as federal agencies alike, that really a rehabilitation center, a specialized service, while we do have domestic violence, rape crisis center, safe shelter, we have different services, but there isn't one that's specialized to victims of trafficking that include the shelter component. And oftentimes when we get the victims, they're left with, where do we go? What do we do? So I think we're at a point now in Savannah that we're looking at what are the steps that we need to take, because the legislators, those who are our allies and stakeholders in this, are looking at Savannah also and how do we need to go forward. But I think a survivor leadership and mentoring would be key, especially if we have the infrastructure.
That's awesome. Yeah, because Obama just had that human trafficking commission is completely made of survivors. So that's really great to hear that. That's good. Thank you.
And I also want to add that we are very sensitive to victim testimonials, and Elizabeth can attest as a media person, I'm called upon all the time by the media to have a victim to tell her story. And as our speaker, the woman, Lainey, as she gave her account of her testimony, you know, that question she raised, what is this going to cost me? And it's very valid. You know, it's almost like re-victimizing a victim or evoking more trauma to ask them to relive and to tell their story. And in terms of answering her question, what is it going to cost her? What is it going to cost Anna today? And the worth, or what we should do by way of repaying them, is to seek to really and truly do something tangible by way of our takeout from today.
Hi, I'm a student from Savannah State, and one of the concerns that I have is like going from theory into practice, and also bringing about the awareness through panels and certain consultations. But when will the city get to the point of moving from panels to task force? I think that all of this information is great, but as future social workers, I feel that we're lacking the information and the tools to go from practice, theory into practice, insofar as, you know, setting up the funding, finding out what areas need the most help. So, you know, all of this is great, but what happens after this?
Well, actually, we're in a time right now where we are acting. And so we have a federal and a state-wide human trafficking task force. And the task force, one of the things we're doing prosecution and investigation of cases and community outreach. And this is part of the community outreach. And so we have more cases that we're prosecuting, and from those cases we're learning from the victims what else they need, and we're realizing what we don't have. And so we're working together as a community and with our task force, with our law enforcement partners and our non-governmental agencies. We're there now, we're working together, and we're realizing what we don't have, and we're building it. And we're also capitalizing and using the things that we do have successfully, and we're doing a great job at it, but we have more to do. And so you're lucky because we're doing it now, so we need your help.
Yeah, one of the things that, just for a point of clarification, it's not so much from a prosecution standpoint as opposed to helping the victims. For instance, like there are limited amount of shelters for women. I mean, that's a major issue. So with these girls being out on the streets and they don't really have any income or education to really support themselves, that's what they're going to do. So, I mean, just having the shelters available, that's a start, as opposed to just the major emphasis being on prosecution?
So I'll talk about the issue with shelters that we've seen locally and everywhere really, is that it's a matter of funding.
Yeah.
We're looking at what's the bottom line to run a center when we're dealing with the infrastructure and staffing. And a lot of either transitional or supportive housing models, depending on, if they're, for some, if it deals with the state, there's a lot of private money that's not necessarily granted at a consistent or comprehensive form by the government. So that goes into the responsibility where we see a need as individuals, but are we as local communities or concerned citizens going to pay for the cost of that infrastructure? Who's going to pay for that cost for building or developing a center or renovating the housing for it or having a 24-hour on-call case manager or social worker? So these are things that cost money that can't necessarily start up within a short period of time. And so it takes a lot of research in finding what's being done and how it can be done. And while it may be a slow process, I think we have to consider what type of quality care are we going to provide for those in our community. Because just building something without the qualified and client-centered approach in mind to be developed may lead into some huge liabilities and then have victims never fully transition or rehabilitate and then go back into the life. So we want to make sure that a high-quality program is developed at a local level.
Take one more question.
I have another response to that, Elizabeth. Relative to your question about task force versus panels, I think that people here have the power to make that happen among the people who are not here. And that comes to our political process. Sex trafficking has to become a real issue and a real concern of politicians, and it can't become a part of a political agenda. And we're only interested at campaign season in sex trafficking. So we all here have the power to vote. And so those individuals who have public offices, they should hear from us and acknowledge that you want to see more of the dollars that they are tasked with managing and the positions that they are tasked with staffing. You want to see more of that support go toward things such as anti-sex violence programs or sex trafficking. And so here in Savannah, we have a great focus on tourism because we're a tourism city. But when our political constituency shifts their focus from the tourism that we want to the tourism we don't want, that's when you'll get more task force and less panels.
To what extent are the victims also held captive and obedient through the use of drugs? And are the victims also the victims of same-sex relationships of both sexes?
To answer the first part of your question about the use of drugs, we have seen that oftentimes, in fact, most of my cases, I've seen the traffickers give victims alcohol, marijuana, and other types of drugs, and they become addicted to those drugs and use the drugs as part of the abuse of resources that they lord over them. And so, in fact, in the federal system, courts have recognized that having a victim addicted to drugs and using that as a manipulative tool to enforce someone to engage in a commercial sex act is criminal, and that of itself. And so yes, it's going on, the law recognizes it, thankfully, and we can prosecute that. And I don't, the second part of your question, there's gender issues going on in every case. It's not, it's heterosexual and homosexual issues, so.
And I'd like to make it clear it's not only in the drug trafficking cases where drugs, not drug trafficking, the human trafficking cases where drugs are being used in the sex trafficking side. We've even seen it in forced labor. We had a gentleman who ran a cabbage farm down in St. Augustine, Florida, and he would go to local homeless shelters to pick up mainly men to come and work on the farm, and he specifically looked for men with addictions already. So these men were already addicted to crack or meth or something, and he would feed their habit, and that's how they were compensated for doing the work that they were doing. But he also used that to manipulate them, to keep them there. And they got their habit taken care of, and they did the work. And when they didn't do the work, then he would beat them, starve them, and take their drugs away from them again. So we see a lot of substance abuse issues related to human trafficking.
When talking about relationships, just something to know, while we see especially at our regional impact, we might see more women than men in reported cases be victim, but really what I say to everybody is that a victim has no face. It can be a young male, it can be an elderly woman, white, black, foreign, domestic, any religion, any nationality. It happens everywhere. As well as traffickers. Some of those who were charged and sentenced in Operation Dark Night were women, as well as citizens and non-citizens. So, I come from a place of non-judgment. So it doesn't matter who you are, where you came from. If you're a victim of a crime, you get the same support and dignity, be treated with dignity and respect as anyone would.
Transition now to, we've got a musical performance from Savannah Arts Academy, Skylar. Read by Mr. Russell.
Strong-willed, so if I don't want to do something, I don't want to do it, and I didn't want to marry him. So I was like, I don't want to break his heart. We're in this relationship, we've been together for a while. What can I do? And so there was a girl at the movie theater who needed a roommate. So I started moving my stuff in with him behind the scenes, and I got fired from the theater, and that was kind of a clean break. This is way like 2005, so there was like no Twitter or Facebook where you can check in and say, oh, she's at Papa John's with her friends, let me go show up. I mean, he couldn't do that. He started asking everybody, where is Anna? Like, I can't find her, and they were like, this is really weird, so they didn't really tell him where I was. So that's kind of the end of that. And I know Lainey made a really good point about it. It's like, you can say that the story ended, but the pain and the healing hadn't even really started. Like, it was just starting to go on. Again, I didn't really understand what had happened. So after this, I start going into life-controlling behaviors like drinking, partying. My favorite drug of choice was boys. I loved boys, boy crazy. And then I was actually having lunch with some of the girls who worked with me at the movie theater. And they were like, Anna, something weird's going on. He's asking me to do these art projects with him, and he wants me to pose in these sexual ways. And I was like, wait, what? Like, that's our special thing. Why would he do that with you? I don't understand. And my heart was broken. And I didn't really understand, so I just kind of like let it slide, even though I was still hurt. After this, I just continued just these life-controlling behaviors. And 2009, I found out he died of colon cancer. I know everybody's probably like, darn, I know it's horrible to be glad that someone died, but I know, right? Like I was just kind of like, ooh, I'm sad. Actually, at that time, I was very heartbroken because to me, my ex-boyfriend had died, who I had this long-term relationship with, like your kind of like first love. And so I went to the funeral because the first thing I thought was, I need to get those pictures back. And to me, there was like 20 pictures, there couldn't be anything more than that, so I'm thinking 20. I went up to his sister, and she's like, I have what you're looking for, they're in my safe. I was like, okay. So I met up with her, and she gave me this big old box, and I was like, what the heck did I leave there, because this thing is huge. I opened it up, and I found out, this is when I'm not with her, and I opened it up, and I found he mass-produced the pictures. I was like, there were 4x6s, 8x10s, black and white colored pictures. I found out he was running a business. Do I have legal proof that money was exchanged? No, but why would you print thousands of pictures just for your own self to look at? I highly doubt it, just saying. So this is still like, I'm not understanding what happened. happened. I didn't understand why he never told me. So I'm in my sociology classes at school, and I started to hear this term, sex trafficking. I saw the movie Taken, and I'm like, whoa, this is crazy. It's overseas? That's nuts. And then I started to learn that it was in the United States. I was like, say, what? Like, it's in the U.S.? Like, really? This place is supposed to be safe. So then I learned that I heard these different stories. I was like, wait, strip clubs? What? Like, I thought it was just like these people who come from overseas and like held in chains and stuff. So I one time read this story. It was a girl in Wilmington, and it said she was with this older guy, and you know, they dated for a while. He asked her to be a part of this art project, and you know, and went on to talk about the story. I was like, wait, that's my story, and it clicked. And so I was just like, wait a second, I was trafficked? What? Like, that's not a form of trafficking. Like, what happened to me was so much different. But if you look at the manipulation, you think about it. The pimp meets a young girl or boy, because it happens to boys too, by the way. It's a very prevalent issue, and currently there are no safe homes for boys. The first one right now is being built in Greenville, North Carolina, and then there's one in Atlanta area they're trying to raise funding for. But yeah, they meet the boy or the girl, and they start to get close with them, and it's called grooming. And they start to tell them all these things they want to hear. They commonly, which kind of person do you think they prey on? Rich? Okay, yeah. Taken, it does happen that way, but it's very rare that it happens in that kind of situation. They tend to go for the people who are vulnerable, the runaways, homeless, people who feel unloved and unwanted, abandoned, neglected. So we talk about who I used to be. And so it clicked, and then once it hit, all the post-traumatic symptoms started coming up, and I knew I needed help. And so I reached out to this program. Has anybody heard of the program Mercy Ministries? Yes, okay, it's called Mercy Multiplied now, different name, same place. So I went in 2011, I graduated in 2012. It was the hardest yet a most amazing thing I ever did for myself. It is a Christian-based program. I'm not saying that secular programs, there's anything wrong with them, but I personally believe I believe Jesus was the answer for me, definitely. I learned how to make good choices and different choices. I worked through the generational patterns. I got that foundation because, like Lainey was talking about, it's like you have to keep going. Like, there's things that pop up now, and I'm like, oh gosh, I gotta reprocess that. Dang it, I thought I got through that, and I realized that I didn't. So I have to keep reworking through things. But I have a good foundation now, so I know what to do. And so I don't fall into those old behaviors. I don't have to cut anymore to deal with my pain. I don't have to go drink anymore to deal with my pain. So yes, I graduated in 2012, and I'm here now. And I hope that you can kind of see the link between pornography and sex trafficking and how similar they look. So let's go back over it again. So we're going to talk about a girl who goes, or a boy, okay, let's just say person or child meets older guy, or just meets a guy in general, and he says, you know, hey, you know, you're cute or whatever, and, you know, why don't you come, like, to date me or whatever, and then he says, okay, I got this job, you know, you only gotta sleep with this person like one time. That's just enough, one time. And then they offer, you know, I'm gonna take care of you. And they become almost like a father figure to them. And so they continue this cycle of commercial sex acts. Money is made, but the child does not receive any of the profits. Now let's talk about me again. So I'm this abandoned, neglected girl who meets this older guy who tells me that I'm, you know, all these great things about me. And he said, you know, just a few pictures, you know, just do this art project. It's awesome. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. And then, you know, he's keeping my money. He's keeping the profits. I didn't know what he was doing with these pictures. So I hope that you can really see that it's the same dynamic, same victimization. And if we don't do anything to educate ourselves on the many forms of sex trafficking, we won't be able to, you know, combat it effectively. We have to see all the different forms and learn what they look like, because it's like If we only focus on looking at it as prostitution, we won't see the boy over here who needs help with labor trafficking, or the boy being sold for sex, or the girl that, like me, who's in high school, who came from a wealthy family that's doing pornography with her boyfriend while she's, going to school every day. So we have to be looking at it like that. So I guess I'll take some questions if you have any. This is my contact information. If you find me on Facebook, do the one that's the like page, because after I speak, a lot of people try to add me on Facebook, so y'all are great, but I'd rather connect on the public page, so just think like that. But feel free to send me any questions if you don't want to ask them here. I'd be happy to connect with you. But yeah, what's your question?
It's always been debatable what's art and what's pornography. I think of the Hindu temples in Gujarat that shows curiously populated deities. He said that they should be destroyed because causes the young girls to go into sex trafficking.
I mean, I think that the issue is sex trafficking itself. I mean, if we try to go through all the ways that people can be groomed or sent into it, like, you can't just go get upset at any kid for, I don't know. It's like, for them, it's like the entryway. We can't focus on the entryway, we have to focus on the crime itself. So I wouldn't say you have to go get rid of the temples or change the cultural practices. I think if we go and look at the crime itself, that's what the focus should be. So, I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah? Like someone who could be vulnerable to going into trafficking? Yeah, I would say, oh my gosh, I just had that answer. Know what a healthy relationship looks like, because I think if I had known what it looked like and what it didn't look like, things would have been a lot different for me. I think that if I knew that being with a 40-year-old in high school was not normal, I would have been able to say, that's not okay. Or like Nick and I, if we have a situation and we know, okay, this is not healthy versus this is healthy, we're able to have a healthy relationship because we see what is not okay. And we'll be, for a kid to be able to say, no, I don't want to do that. That's not good. That's not healthy. So I think that's really, really important, because I feel like now in society, there's so much focus on the glamour or dressing like, you don't even care about your body, you show everything out there. And I think that it's just important to know what is good relationship, what's respectable, what's not respectable, because I think the media, specifically pop culture within like the music industry, has really affected that. So I think that's important. Yes?
Okay, so I work with survivors of domestic violence, and a lot of times they'll tell me about instances where they took these photos with their romantic partner or for their romantic partner, and then when they separate, what does the partner do? He publishes them on Facebook or in some type of porn hub. What advice would you want to give to people who have gone through that type of exposure?
Oh, that's a hard one, because, I mean, people think about all the times you post a picture on Facebook. How easy is it? I'm sure some of y'all probably did a selfie here and be like, look, we're at the trafficking thing. Maybe you didn't, but, it's, you take a selfie of yourself with like this cute milkshake or something. I don't know. But it's like, it's so easy to put that out there. Imagine if somebody else did that of you naked, or you having sex, or someone else touching you inappropriately, and it's out there. That is so victimizing. I think that that's a definitely need for a very specific counseling. But I think for you, just meeting them where they're at and just reinforcing who they are separate from that. I know for me, like, I don't know if they're out there. People ask me that question all the time. They're like, are the pictures out there? Do you care where they're at? I said, honestly, there's nothing I can really do as far as knowing every little place they are. I can just know who I am now and what I am not. And what I am not is a dirty person who it was my fault for all of that happening, because I can't control that, but I can control myself. And so I think really reinforcing who they are. But I don't work in direct services. I don't have a master's in social work or counseling. So from that side, but from the general idea, I think that's really important. But that's a very traumatic experience. I have a lot of people I know who that's happened. I can't even begin to comprehend what that's like for all of that. So, yeah.
Hi, Anna. What type of societal factors do you think enables that type of thing to go on?
With the, like, social media, or?
Well, what happened with you? If you could,
Oh, okay, I think that, if we think, do a lot of people here know about the hip hop industry? Like, you know, you hear rappers and stuff, and you hear them, they talk about prostitution, and it's almost like glamorized to be with a lot of men. And so when the pimp comes out and says, you know, you can be like the number one. In pimp language, the number one, or not the number one, the, I guess, most privileged girl under the trafficker is called the bottom B word. I don't want to say it. And stuff. And so it's like, if you got the most men, like, you're important, or that makes you awesome, or that makes you amazing. And so for me, it was like, I got a man who wants me, who's gonna take care of me. And I think specifically in the music industry, you know, they sing a lot about, like, I got a man who's gonna take care of me, and he's got all this money, and that's what matters. Like, Nick and I in our relationship, we're broke now. Like, he's in college, I just graduated. We all know ramen noodles is like, you know, find a way to make it work. And so, but by no means, I mean, maybe one day we'll have enough money to, like, I'll be like, yeah, this guy's awesome. But it's just like, I think that it looks at such superficial factors and those kinds of things. I think that was what caused me to think it was okay. I think a lot of it is also how you see celebrities dress. I don't know if y'all saw the Met Gala, how you saw J-Lo and Kim. I mean, they're dressed in like a tablecloth, pretty much. It was like this, please don't Google it, I shouldn't even say what that was, but and like people in my age group who watched Britney Spears and the things that she would wear. To me, posing and the sexual things that I had to and the things that I had to wear seemed normal and acceptable because of what I was taught through the media and pop culture. So I think that's also it. So the man taking care of me because of money and he's in charge and I don't really have a choice because all that matters is that he can take care of me, being with a lot of men. So it doesn't matter who it is, as long as you got one, that's what matters. And then how I see other women dress and the relationships around me. So I think that's it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Yes.
If you witness someone getting raped, you have to jump in.
Ooh, that's a hard, I mean, that's a loaded question. I don't even know. I mean, let me address trafficking as a whole, because that's like a case-by-case thing. Because sometimes, like, obviously, if you see it happening and it's like out in the dark or something, you want to put a stop to it. But as far as trafficking is concerned, the number one thing I tell people is don't go be the hero, because you being the hero can maybe get the victim or the survivor hurt because the pimp will blame them or use it as more manipulation to say, why'd you cause this? I'm gonna have to beat you, or I'm gonna make you do this or this or this. You know, it can have very negative factors happen from that. It can also, something that, if you don't know how to think like an attorney or someone in law enforcement, every detail counts. So say if, you know, you go try to investigate yourself, pimps are smart. We're getting smarter than them, but they're pretty smart. They can easily move the girls or the boys like overnight or something, and now you've made that case, it's totally wiped. So that's when it's really important to simply report it, and you can call the Polaris Project hotline. It was mentioned before. If you want to write it down, it's 1-888-3737-888. You can call and you can report it. You can ask questions. They can even give you a case number, and you can call back to check in on see how that's going, and they'll share what they're able to with you. But specifically with trafficking, I think it's really important to not be the hero, or that you can be the hero by reporting versus getting involved, because that can cause a lot more problems than you think it would. Trafficking, domestic violence, and sexual assault are very, very important issues, and they're just as as important as trafficking, but trafficking works a little bit different because it strips you completely of the identity and the profit and things like that. So you have to handle it differently than you would other cases. Other questions? Yes?
Do you think if your family friend got involved, then it would have made a difference for these people following on in the relationship?
Can everybody hear her question? Yes? Yes? Okay. I get that question a lot, actually. I don't honestly know because I am so strong-willed. Don't say anything later. And so maybe it might have, but I think because of what I saw in the media, I mean, that changed my way of thinking more than anything. Than, you know, have dressed women, the way that men are supposed to take care of you. So it might have made a difference, but I don't know. But I do that there's no reason to not to not say something to the child. I think you should always say something, as far as if it's your friend, be like, you know, step in and say something. Yeah. So I don't know. I really honestly don't know, but I get that question a lot. Next. Yes?
I know you mentioned that you went to counseling, but what are some other coping methods that you use to help you to?
That's a really great question. Yeah, I did individual counseling before I went to Mercy, and then I did group counseling on top of that. So I went to a place in Greensboro, and they only charged me $20 a session, so that was a huge blessing. But so definitely those things. But I had a really good support system. I was blessed that I have a really solid church that I go to, and I had other women coming around me and just supporting me and reinforcing who I am and who I'm not, and just encouraging me. But I think it's really important to develop a safe group of people who, this is a hard one, but like understand how to work with a trafficking survivor, meaning that, like I said, it's different. With trafficking survivors, you have to really encourage them to make their own decisions and their dreams and their goals, because it's like you want to nurture them, but if you nurture them too much, that can almost seem like control to them. So just people who are supportive, just encouraging me. Now, and that's just really important to keep that in mind. So if you have a friend who's a trafficking survivor, or you are involved in someone's life that isn't a friend, but just, you know what they've been through, just encourage them and say, you know, I saw your gray with hair and that's your dream. I'm just telling you, you're going to be amazing at it. So I'd say that. The coping skills that I had to learn, because I've had night terrors before as well. Having a safe person I can call to talk to at night, who you know, I can say this is going on, and I'm very blessed that I have solid friends. I'm saying not every single person is wired to be able to do that kind of thing, but if you do have a mentor, like a parent or a teacher or a guidance counselor at school, those things are really important. So I'm trying to think what else I did. Babe, can you think of anything? No? Yeah, those are the main things, I would say, in a general sense, what I did. Any other questions? Yeah.
How did you get in contact with Mercy?
So what had happened was, I had this plan. Again, we're going back to strong-willed Anna. I had this plan that once I realized everything happened, I said, I got to find somewhere to go for 2 weeks, because I got to go to college, get a degree, meet a guy, get married, have some kids, picket white fence, whatever. That was my plan. And after I contacted, when I Googled human trafficking organizations, Safe Horizon popped up, which is in Jersey, New York area. They put me in touch with North Carolina Coalition of Sexual Assault in Raleigh. And I talked to the lady. I said, you got to find me a program I'm going to go through, and it's got to be 2 weeks long. And so she comes back to me a week later. She's like, Anna, that's not really possible. Usually programs last 6 months to a year, or typically a year to 2 years, because it takes that time to get them to the place where it's like, okay, I'm gonna let them in a little bit. And half the time, if you move too quickly with them in a safe home, they run. So it's really hard. So I heard about Mercy, and it was a 6-month program, and it was free. And I said, okay, 6 months is the closest I got to 2 months, but I knew I couldn't stay where I was. So I went there, and it was a free of charge program, so that also kind of helped. If you want to talk about Mercy or hear about Mercy, I'd be happy to help you with that. Other questions? Okay, I want to do one other thing. Who was in high school? You were in high school? I like your hair. It's so pretty. Okay, do you have your phone? I need to look at something. Oh, I like your ring. It's so pretty. Oh, that's not the wedding ring. I was like, but you're in high school. So, okay, thank you. It's that easy. It is that easy. Sorry, I had to use an example. You're very bright, though, I'm sure. But it's that easy. You think about it. It's like, how many times do you go, you're at the mall, and someone says, hey, my phone died. Can I use your phone to, like, make a call? Imagine if it's a little girl in the mall with her friends. It's one of the main ways that my trafficker maintained communication with me is he had my phone number. And he would call me late at night My mom was asleep and stuff, so like they didn't really notice too much, but he built that connection instantly. They have that in with the child and they're able to contact them and be in contact. So it's really important that we think outside the box and we understand how intricate this issue is, but also like the big scope of what it looks like. So I hope that kind of gives you a sense of the reality and how easy it is for a trafficker to connect with a child or just a person in general. So again, contact me if you need anything. I'll be here afterwards to talk to you. So thank you.
Let's give her another round of applause. All right, as we wrap up today's session, we want to go ahead and thank all of our victims that came to speak, our sponsors, panelists, Attorney General's Office, U.S. Attorney's Office, and again,